3、2、1，点火！点火！起飞，敬礼。
It's a major achievement for China's space program. The third and final lab module blasts into space to dock with its permanent home, the Tiangong space station. Hello, I'm Nathan King, filling in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. Hello again, and it's been years in the making, but this week China's space station is finally complete. On Thursday, Chinese taikonauts aboard the Tiangong space station were able to enter the Mengtian lab module and explore their new wing. The Shenzhou 14 crew shared the pride and excitement of the whole country.
Over the past decade, each of us has experienced and witnessed the development and changes of a great era, and is really a great source of happiness to be able to participate in writing this history.
Our home has got larger. Standing here, we are very excited and proud. In the near future, we will welcome the Tiangong 15 crew to complete the first in-orbit crew rotation.
The Mengtian lab module is designed to study fundamental physics and microgravity and could be used to develop quantum technologies too. CGTN's Wu Lei has more on its significance.
Mengtian literally means dreaming of the heaven and symbolizes Chinese people's yearning for the universe beyond the sky. As a second lab module of the Chinese space station, Mengtian has a total length of 17.88 meters and weighs over 23 tons. It consists of 4 sections: working cabin, cargo airlock cabin, payload cabin, and resource cabin. Mengtian is a module with the strongest load capacity among all the modules of the Chinese space station.
Mengtian Lab is equipped with 13 experimental cabinets and 3 external platforms. 2 of the platforms are open and expanded, and 1 is fixed. And there are 3 payload positions on the resource cabin, as well as some others on the payload cabin. Mengtian adds 37 payload positions to the space station.
Microgravity scientific experiments will be carried out in Mengtian Lab, but it will be more convenient to carry out external experiments outside the cabin.
The payloads can be sent in and out by a special tool in the cargo airlock cabin. This will help conduct more external experiments.
There is a special equipment on Mengtian Lab for releasing micro spacecraft. With the help of astronauts, the payload transfer tool, and robotic arm, the equipment will eject small satellites weighing about 100 kilograms to its orbit, just like a slingshot. Mengtian Lab module is mainly used for conducting experiments and working. Meng Yao says he and his team have spent more than 10 years turning the idea into reality. These valuable experiences have laid a solid foundation for the development of more advanced spacecraft in the future. Wu Lei, CGTN, Wenchang spacecraft launch site.
Just incredible stuff. I'm really going to enjoy this show, but let's get to our guests. Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Amitabha Ghosh. He's a space scientist who's been working on NASA Mars mission since 1997. Also with us from Reston, Virginia, just outside of D.C. is Keith Cowing. He is an editor of NASAWatch.com and a former rocket scientist. And from Florida, one of my childhood heroes, John Zarrella, is a distinguished journalist who covers the U.S. space program. And Xu Yunsong is the Director General of the Asia Pacific Space Cooperation Organization in Beijing. And that's where I'd like to start. Director General Xu, I was just watching this docking procedure, and to the eye, it's just incredible. But what does it mean for the mission?
Well, I think all of us here in China is very excited because we have 3 astronauts in orbit for a long period of time. Liu Yang, the lady was speaking, was the first lady in space from China. And also we had a complete T-shaped station that makes into a 3-bedroom space station. So everybody is very excited because the Mengtian is for biological testing and the Mengtian is more for material science. And also they have an exposed segment of the station. So it is very much a new era for the Chinese space community to get ready for more exciting testings on this test bench.
Well, Director General, could you just go into a bit more detail about the sort of experiments that are going to be conducted? I love the way they've laid it out in different wings as well for different study areas. What specifically? We've heard about quantum physics, which might need a whole another program to explain. We've heard about alternative artificial intelligence, but also a lot of biological experiments, a telescope, working on speed of light. Fill us in.
Well, yes, the Mengtian segment, which was launched a couple of months ago, was for biological testings. They also have these space seeding programs. They put the wheat into space and cultivate them for one complete cycle, so that those harvested seeds will be brought back to Earth for more cultivation. This is very helpful for agriculture purpose. And the Mengtian, which was recently launched, is for material science. This is including a combustion chamber, that for combustion testings for different science purpose. And also we have on the Mengtian segment cryogenic testing for materials. And the Mengtian also have a very special feature, which is what we call it the robotic airlock. This robotic airlock will allow the astronauts to bring payloads out of the station, for example, deployment of satellites, without going EVA. So that airlock will robotically deploy the satellites and other payloads into space. And as you mentioned, there's a telescope, which was originally designed as part of the station, which is called Xuntian. The telescope is for astronomical purpose, and was originally designed to fix on the Mengtian segment. But now it was designed as a separate spacecraft. It will be flying around and in parallel with the space station. So it is for observatory and collection of data, easy access to the telescope, and in future, easy maintenance if necessary by the EVA of the astronauts from the station. So there's a whole bunch of things very exciting for the space community, especially for the scientific community, to look forward in the exposed segment of the exposed segment of the Mengtian, which is newly launched, and those exposed experiments will be also collecting informations on the radioactive and cosmetic rays, so that is exposed to the outer space.
I'm sure you could go on for the whole show listing what they're doing, and I really appreciate that precise rundown. I'm going to go to Amitabha next, but first of all, I just want to get the reaction of the Professor of Institute of High Energy Physics from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, explaining in detail about that part you just mentioned.
So, sorry?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't think we have the clip lined up.
Oh, you don't have the clip. Okay. So yeah, so I think it's a very fascinating sets of experiments. One experiment which I think caught my imagination here is there is a Norwegian experiment to study tumor growth. Apparently tumors have a different behavior and they stop growing in low gravity. And so that is one of the very exciting experiments. And there are also experiments to do with controlling fires, then growth of seedlings, then as was already mentioned, a lot of material science experiments, including behavior in the molten state. And then, of course, the whole idea of going to the International Space Station and this space station is to try to study effect on human health, so that at some point humans can travel to Mars, which is a much longer journey. So the effect on loss of bone density and muscle. So I'm sure there are experiments on that as well.
Kikau, I just want to bring you in here. Obviously, this is a sign that China's space program has kind of arrived. But what excites you most about the details that we're learning of what's going on up there?
Well, I have to say I cut my teeth working on Space Lab experiments in the space shuttle that I helped design what eventually became the International Space Station. And I just look down those long shots and I see familiar things. I see, this is a thumb drive and they look the same all over the world, right. But this could be a 1 terabyte or it could be 100 gigs. You don't know.
What about that wonderful door, though, that allows things to come in and out so beautifully? I mean, that to me is just a...
I was waiting for that because on the space station, they have a thing that shoots the CubeSats out, but it's in the arm.
Right.
This skips a step. It looks a little easier, but what you see on these space stations, whether you go from the Russian ones to the American ones to the Chinese ones, it's like they say, something old, something new, something tried, something true.
Right. I mean, it's a scientific community, isn't it? What stands out about this one, though? Because they've had a few years, obviously, ahead of when you were working. Not to date you, sir, and we thank you for everything you've done. But, technology does march on very quickly.
It's not messy yet. That's the trick. When you're seriously, I mean, I got yelled at when we brought the Russians in and I said, well, how about if we do this with a hose? And they said, oh, you can't do that. And the Russians said, no problem. Now it looks like it's lived in. And when you see astronauts in the station going like that, they're busy.
So what you're saying is too ordered, wait till all the astronauts taikonauts are on board, wait till all the experiments are going, and then some sort of controlled chaos is what you're saying.
Yep.
John, I'm waiting to bring you in last because, you are a veteran of covering everything I wanted to do when I was a kid, which is, stand there as these incredibly brave individuals backed by incredibly brilliant scientists like we've just been hearing, take the ultimate jump, and that's off our planet. I mean, you've covered the US space program in detail. You are probably the most renowned broadcaster when it comes to space. When you're looking one step back at the Chinese space program, and particularly this, what do you think?
Nathan, here's a couple of things. I think that on the large scale, what this has done, it gives China this permanent presence in space of a space station, and it opens up something they never had before. A whole world of scientific opportunities for so many scientists in China and in other countries that are collaborating with them that they never had before. So the amount of research they're going to be able to do is going to be fantastic. Excuse me. But on the other side, Nathan, I think you have to caution. Because I remember when the International Space Station was first permanently occupied, and it's been more than 20 years now. 2000 was the year. We all thought, my goodness, there are going to be all of these incredible breakthroughs. We're going to have cures for cancer. And, so the caution is that while it's extremely exciting, it's going to take some time. It doesn't happen overnight. All of the scientific investigations, the experimentation. Yes, there have been, a lot of studies on the human body in space, long duration space flight, right. How it affects the human body, breakthroughs in medical devices, but it will take time. And so, that's something that China, I'm sure, realizes, and I'm sure their scientists know. But the people and everybody else around the world say, well, wait a minute. It's not going to happen overnight. Well, and one thing to Keith's point, I talked to many astronauts who have been on the space station, have told me they lose stuff up there all the time. They can't find it. They thought they put it in this drawer and it's not there. Somebody may have moved it to another drawer. So once it's messy up there, that's when the real work is being done.
Well, luckily, patience is considered a Chinese characteristic.
Yes.
So hopefully that will transfer to space and is transferring to space. You're right to talk about the collaboration, and I know a couple of you brought this up. Chinese scientists are, of course, collaborating with a lot of other nations, European scientists, for example. And I don't understand any of this, but it's a high-energy cosmic ray detector, or HERD. Let's hear from one of the scientists from China explaining how it works, and then I'm going to get the reaction of the Director General off the back.
The goal of the experiment that we will detect the most high-energy particles in space with the highest precision. So that's the goal. This is why we designed the experiment to have this large dimension, to have this weight, and to be able to receive particles from all directions.
Director General Zhu, what does this mean, and how significant is it?
Well, I think Professor Zhang Shuanan is an old friend of mine. I think he's been involved in the astrophysics for many years.
Right.
The particle detector is not new. I mean, we have started the bilateral cooperation with ESA, European Space Agency, 20 years back on the double star in collaboration with the Cluster 2. And this is to fly the same payload on different orbit from the Chinese satellite and also from the European satellite. And also we put these detectors on board our lunar mission in collaboration with the Europeans. The high energy detector was provided by DLR of Germany, and this was flying on board the Chang'e 4 mission. So all of these are exciting things that in international collaboration, we fly different orbit and different spacecraft with the same payload, and they're detecting the space environment, and it was very useful for the scientific community.
Thank you. Amitabha, what, apart from the cancer and Norway treatment that you mentioned earlier, what sticks out internationally more exciting for you?
So I would like to pick up on a point John made. You know, what is the outlook here of the results you will get from these experiments? So he made a very good point, you know, that the results will take time. And I want to just add one thing here, having worked in a Mars program for such a long time. The discovery is always serendipitous. You cannot predict a discovery. So we have to just keep looking. But let's get back to what this whole program means. What does the ISS mean? What does the Chinese space station mean? We are really at 250 miles from Earth. We are trying to train for a much longer journey of maybe 400 million miles to Mars. And that is the first step. And maybe to the moon, which is 384,000 miles. But we are still at this 250 miles. And it is, I think the main motive is to learn more about the human body so that they can survive this long journey to Mars, which will take at least 2 years. So I think we should put this in our, this is the real goal. I mean, the science of course, might yield some results, some very interesting results serendipitously. But the main goal is, it is going to be very exciting after Elon Musk's SpaceX Starship comes on board, and we're going back to the moon in a couple of years, or even maybe this by 2024. Actually, the next mission of the SLS is slated for December 1 or 19th. Right. So all this will happen very quickly in this coming 10 years. And I think this is the staging ground, the space station is the staging ground where we get prepared for it.
Well, Keith, that was going to be my question to you, but let's pick up on that, is that, you know, as this space station becomes complete, we see the International Space Station sort of winding down in the next few years, but there's all these sort of private initiatives coming out of the US. We've got Space Force as well. Ideas of a planned mission to Mars, you know, going back to the moon for the US, definitely on China's radar as well. Is this healthy competition? Is this the new space age after a lull?
Well, you know, I grew up in the 60s, so back then it was us versus them, and there were really no other options. Maybe the Europeans on 1 day a week. But now it's a truly global thing, and what you're seeing is a space station that is built on the shoulders of the stations that came before it. And as I heard just a moment ago, the whole serendipity issue. Right. Well, you can't, serendipity didn't happen if you don't start doing something.
You have to plan for chance.
Yeah, now you have 2 space stations. And there is a program with NASA where they will add additional modules to the International Space Station, which may split off so you'd have 3. And then they're funding some other ones, so there may be 4 or 5. So the more of these you have, the more of them that use the interchangeable standards so that you can do things here or there or both. And you just, there's an emergent property that comes from this. It's called cooperation. And again, it goes back to serendipity. Serendipity thrives on how many times you try and do one thing and then suddenly you stumble on something else. Again, the more chances you have to do these things and see what does and doesn't work, the more likely you are to stumble across something probably that you don't know you're going to stumble across.
Keith, just a quick follow-up. Do you think this is a good example of international cooperation in space from what you've seen before?
Well, when I was on before with Director Xu, we talked about this because there's some politics right now that jump in the middle.
I'm going to get to John with that because he's a US expert as well. But in just generalities.
Yeah,
but
Keith is absolutely
thing
right.
is,
I mean, the problem we have right now.
Sorry, John, just hold on a second. Keith's just finishing.
The cooperation happens despite the politics, and sometimes it may be you have a meeting in Canada, or you have PIs from a different country and so forth. So even though the politics of the day may interfere with things, as I said on your air many times, why is it that when we go into space, even with people that we're not always friends with, we get along? Maybe there's something about the way that we do things.
Maybe it's that planet behind you, right? Looking down and just seeing it all. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine.
It could be that simple. It apparently there's something magic in the air up there that makes people just want to get along. Maybe that's the ultimate spin-off for back on Earth.
Maybe humanity fills a vacuum. Let's go to John before we get too hippie about this. But John, as you know, NASA is essentially banned from working with the Chinese Space Agency.
Right.
And, there's lots of talk about cooperation of climate change between Washington and Beijing. This is really overdue, isn't it? Considering the distrust that we see on the planet and all the opportunities we see outside of it.
Yeah, and Keith is absolutely right, though. On that lower level, there's always talk back and forth. There's international meetings that scientists attend.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter where in the world they're from, and they get together and they share things. But from that political standpoint, at the upper levels, it's impossible at this point in time, this juncture, for the United States to work with China. That's just it, period.
Well, I mean, does the weaponization of space accusations sort of poison the atmosphere? We've got Space Force, Donald Trump's fifth arm of the military. What are they spending, like $25 billion on it? They got more money than they asked for. Who gets that these days? Is that this whole idea that it's sort of a Pentagon thing rather than a scientist thing, basically polarizing opinions down here on Earth? It's a bit like, it's just like the Cold War, where the rockets were, it was all beautiful, but we understood what the rockets were about. They were essentially about the missile silos too. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you have the Space Force is a separate entity,
right, from
NASA,
right.
So and what NASA, for instance, is doing now with the Artemis program that was mentioned, and in 2 weeks they're going to be trying to get off the ground again to do that first uncrewed mission around the moon, which would then, if successful, lead to 2024. But so you have the civilian side and you have the military side, and so there is a distinction, but does it sometimes get fuzzy?
I think, yeah, is the obvious answer. I mean, let's bring in Director General Xu on this because, obviously he's technical. To me, it's not a coincidence that as other powers gain in space, other powers want to step up. You get my point. But the fact that the space program comes along just as China's making its first strides, Space Force rather, there's accusations about weaponization of space, there's a ban on cooperating with China. How do we get to beyond where we are?
Well, I think besides U.S., China is the only nation that has a space station, lunar programs, and landed on Mars. So all of these are, that we came along, and there are many domains, like you have mentioned, that the The ICBM is the basic rocket technology, but I think there are sensitive areas like remote sensing technologies, rocket technologies. So there are many things that are like international treaties that are controlling this, like MTCR and ITAR. But there are areas that we need to have mandatory cooperations. These areas including space science missions, lunar missions. If you've seen a Space Force comedy in the U.S., China and U.S. was both on the moon. And also you have space debris issues and space weather. All of these has to have international cooperation, this including China and U.S. And I was part of that bilateral effort. I was talking State Department of U.S. I think there are many ways, not only in bilateral basis and PIs and scientific communities, but also in the multilateral fora, we can also cooperate.
Great. We've got about 2 minutes left, but I want every one of you just to end on a positive note. And John, let's start with you, Zarrella. If you had to choose one mission for the international community to cooperate on, China, US, everyone, where would it be in the next year or to 5?
Well, I think eventually it's got to be Mars.
Right, manned mission to Mars.
Because it's such a monumental program that will cost so much money.
Right, hence the need for cooperation.
It's got to be Mars. Got to be cooperation to get to Mars. No doubt about it.
Amitabha, do you agree?
No, I think we're getting too distracted with this cooperation thing. I think without cooperation, both countries are headed in a certain direction, and that makes sense according to their priorities, and that is going to continue. I think both the US and China have very different directions. The US, it's going to be fantastic with SpaceX coming on board with Starship and increasing capability. And the Chinese, they have, I think, an asteroid sample return, then a Mars sample return, then a Jupiter mission, and finally a lunar base. All these are discussions happening in the background. So
so a healthy strategic competition, I like that. Keith, just final word to you. Where would you like to see international cooperation go if we could solve the politics?
The more space stations, the better. And the more people in space, the more things in space, the better. And the governments are no longer the only ones who are calling the shots.
That's a good point.
Cases, there are people who have more money than some countries, and they're spending it in space because they can. And
Oh, God. Elon Musk in charge of the International Space Program. I don't want to go there. That's definitely for another show. Great guest, great discussion. Thanks for bringing light to all this fascinating developments in space, whether you're Chinese, US, or just one of these people who just looks up at the stars and wonders. That's all we have time for. I'm Nathan King, Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching.